Welcome back, everybody. So today I've got a short update for the Foda pack, mostly aimed at helping people to get the most out of their training. So by now you probably will have been training either locally or with a run pod or with some other method or with the online Civic web trainer that we looked at last episode. Now, obviously, just in case you missed that, it's literally a case of clicking Train Lora, adding your data set, that's images with text pairs, and then you choose, once you're happy with the captioning, you choose a dev model and use one of our configs. We've been doing a lot of discussion over in the Discord. I've been placing a lot of my results up there and we've all been sharing. But essentially what the result has been is we've got an Assassin Carb test model, which comes in 3 versions, which you can get all 3 and compare them. Before I forget, hit that bell. Now, where were we? There's also been the beginning of the Thora Flux Lite pack. There's going to be a bunch of modules, so you can choose which ones. If you notice here, the backgrounds are a bit washed out, and that's because the backgrounds actually come in a separate Lora. So I'm experimenting with a few different methods of squeezing lots of images into less steps without altering the learning rate or repeats. And then over on Not the True World, which is a repeat of the 1.5 and SDXL model, I've created first a reduced training rate version. So this has been trained, I think. No. V1 is a pruned data set, and it has 20 repeats for 8 epochs. Whereas V2 is using the full data set, but it's trained on half repeats. So both of those training strategies produce different models with different applications. So I've put them both out for comparison. So you can see that's the difference. Obviously, it's a different way of fitting more images inside a model. Now, when you're doing your training, you're going to often see something like, let's go to one that's finished. Something like this. So when it's finished, you're going to see this page. So as you can see, we've done 13 epochs, and these are my test prompts. And if I go all the way down, we've got quite a few what we call intermediate checkpoints. So what you're going to do is you're going to download all of them, or at least the last 8. So if you've got 13, 1, 2, 3, and so on here, get the last 8, right? You can get them all, but we're only going to use the last 8 in this workflow. You can add more if you want, but I found 8 was a decent amount, and everything's hooked up to just work. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a few examples of this, and I can show you this is how we find our convergence point. This is how we can make sure that we're using the correct intermediate version, because some of them are going to be overtrained. So undertraining is pretty easy to spot. All you have to do is make sure it's like, is it still changing? If it's still changing every epoch, then it can still train more. If it's not changing anymore, it's starting to overtrain. Obviously, if it explodes, that's also bad. But anyway, let's get on and take a look at some examples. Okay, so as you can see, this is the sort of thing which the workflow is going to produce. It's going to produce as many in 4s as you have. That's why I said 4, 8, and then, it's easy. It's an easy number to plug into this. So you can label with whatever epoch it is that you're plugging into it. And it's just going to make you 2 grids, which you can then compare next to each other easily. So for example, on this one, the correct answer is epoch 11. You might say, why, Mr. Johnson? I mean, there's still some changes, and it's true, but we're not looking for, we're not looking for PhD level spot the difference. To look for overtraining, we're looking for like elementary level spot the difference. So for example, this is much, much more different than this. However, these two are very slight variations. I appreciate the building's the same, but I'm talking about everything else. If you take a look at this island here, it's now over here and it doesn't move again. That's my point. It's going to be more obvious in some later ones. I've picked these out. So, so here we go. So in fact, is this out of order? Right, that's perfect. So these are the earlier versions, right? So as you can see, it's changing significantly every image it's learning, every epoch, it's learned a lot. And so the output is radically different because it's learned a lot every time. But as I said, eventually, look how different these images are, right? Yeah, we've got the same building in the middle. I appreciate that, but everything else about the image is changing, okay? And then when we get to the late epochs, look, now it's just this. It becomes anchored in whatever this is. And yeah, you might get some slight changes, like the poles turn into into cranes, and this house turns into this pagoda, and little bits, but the main sort of overarching structure of the image hasn't really changed now. So we can see this again. So here you can see this image again. Each image is different. We've got a completely different aircraft, and the clouds as well. They were like this. Now they're like this, and they're like this. You see? So we've got an evolution from here to here, from Epoch 6 to Epoch 9. And then look, the airship completely changes shape because it's still learning. But when we get to E10, E11, certainly after E11, it doesn't really change. We've got the same spires, we've got the same airship, same cloud pattern, right? But before that, so I'm just trying to show you like how to know. So here's another one, right? We've got a building, there's a crane. The crane isn't fully formed. It hasn't really learned the crane, right? It still hasn't learned the crane. It's starting to learn it's a crane, but it's not the right shape at all. And every time we get a different building, okay? So then when we get to Epoch 10, now it's starting to make sure, oh, this is actually a wooden building. Then it tries to make it the funny colors again. It still can't quite get the handle of the crane in this, but eventually it just makes it out of the shot. But the point I'm trying to make is that after Epoch 11, it doesn't really learn anything more. I mean, you could argue maybe 12, but this is a 0.7 Lora strength. So you could just bump the strength up. Let's do a couple more because this is like, good stuff. So here we have Epoch 6, 7, 8, and 9. It's not really changing much, but if you pay attention to the building on the side, the building is changing a lot. It's changing less each time, I'll grant you, but it's still changing a lot in the colors, the patterns, what's on them, where the shading is. There's even some writing here. But by the time we get to the end, it kind of settles. It kind of settles, and then it doesn't change. These two last images haven't really changed at all. Barely different. Okay, yeah, look at the writings there. So I said this is probably the best one, right? And sometimes you've got to pick, these are all in the same Lora. So sometimes you've got to pick the best one overall as well. So sometimes I'll admit, sometimes with this model, sometimes 10 was really nice. But I found that if you look, for example, here, look at how this image is at Epoch 10. And then look at what Epoch 11 and 12 and 13 look like. They're virtually the same. So it's almost like it got to this point here, which actually looks a lot like the training data. And then it went back to what it thought it was before. I'm not saying it's unlearned. That's not true. Because if you look at the early epochs, this is what it was making at Epoch 6. And it's a refined and evolved, refined and evolved, refined and evolved. And then it became this, but then a little bit more, and it became that. And this is the one I picked, Epoch 11. But then, as you can see, after that sort of little bump or dip, however you want to represent your graph in your head, it's gone back to this. Again, with this one, as you can see, this is a lot like the original output. And then we're starting to get elements of the trained image in, the trees. We don't have this bridge here. It's probably going to come back, though. You can never tell with this. I didn't even ask for the planet. I don't know why it puts planets in it. It's probably one of the tokens is related to planet. But yeah, as you can see, it's changing the design of the building, change the design. But it's changing quite a lot every time. All right, I hope I'm trying to underscore it. Because by the time you get to this, which is almost done, and you could argue this is good, you see what I mean? But the reason I picked this one is because if you look at the planet here, right, and it goes boop, and then we've got clouds. Okay. And then boop, straight back again. Do you remember how in the last image it was looking away and then it trained again, it evolved to this, and then it sort of fell back to that? I'm sure there's a technical word for this, but I'm trying to show you like a practical way to understand. Because people were saying to me, how do you know what is the best checkpoint? How do you know which one is the best? Okay. And the way you know is you run the images. But then how do you know which one is best? And I'll go pixel blind after looking at too many images, just like the rest of you guys. All right. But the point is that you can see there's an evolution which is taking place. It's going from 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 to 10. And then something happens. You can even sort of see it in the colors. Someone pointed this out to me when they were looking at it. There was like a green shift and then there was suddenly a red shift. But that might be coincidental. I haven't really looked into it. But the point is, you can see massive changes in the background, massive changes in the skyline, big changes in the building as it's trying to learn the shape that you're training in. Okay. And like I said, all of these are quite samey. Even Epoch 10 is quite samey. And if you look at the planes, they're kind of flying all over the place. And then also, this is very much like Epoch 12 and 13, which is that same sort of pinching effect I was talking about, where it's sort of like this, and then it becomes to Epoch 11, which again, I like the planes. The car is a bit big and out of scale to the people, but you can't have it all, I guess. Nothing to stop a little in paint there. But yeah, it seems to sort of get to the perfect point and then collapse back to what was before, maybe. If we take a look at this one as well, again, you can see massive changes in the variance as it's learning. And then when it gets to Epoch 10, it kind of just stops, doesn't it? You've got the American flag, which I didn't ask for. So another more reason why I think this is the convergence point. And then, like I said, after this point, even the bird doesn't move. You see what I mean? Birds change. We have changes, significant changes from 10 to 11. And after that, no change. So that, to me, is diminishing returns. It's not exploding or collapsing like previous models used to, but it is becoming not worth going any further, right? So here we have Epoch 6, 7, 8, and 9. So as you can see, massive changes, both in the composition, distance, scale, the frequency of objects. This is starting to go a bit nuts, in my opinion, with all this craziness going on, right? But okay. And then again, this is starting to look almost dystopian with the amount of craziness going on in the brutalism here. But then 11, it looks like a photo from some kind of sci-fi thing. Suddenly it settles itself down. But look, immediately after we get the go, breaks down back to this noisiness again. It's not as bad as this, in my opinion, but you can see it's really trying too hard. Whereas this has got a lot more foliage and stuff. And I think this is a jungle punk prompt. So it shouldn't be like this. It should be more like this. Certainly not like this. It hasn't learned properly at this point. So if you have an intimacy with your data set, you would know. The more photorealistic, the easier it is to spot. That one's quite hard to pick out, actually. This one was a real challenge for me because it does change a lot, but then it doesn't change at all. And I was like, tough one. Planes as well. So again, here we got a plane. We got some kind of aerial base. We got a plane. We got two bases now, and then we got a plane, and the same plane. You see what I mean? So then I went with E11 because generally speaking, I'm leaning towards E11 at this point. Oh, and this was probably the most. Where was it? Was it this one? Ah, it's gone. I had a great example using this set. I guess I don't have it saved here, where it was literally a case of the only castle with a black background was E11. But actually, E7 is really cool. The idea is this is a castle in a black void, but for some reason it's trained the sky in. So I think that is the original image, and then these are the outputs with my not the true world, because it's actually a secret detail enhancer. So for anybody that's been watching all the way to the end of this timestamp, there's your bonus. Not the True World isn't just a style set. If you use it without prompting triggers, it's actually an effective detailer. So as you can see here, you can see it kicking in the different versions. So these are the different Not the True World version 1 we're looking at right now. And as you can see, it does an effective detail pass. We're getting a dude coming in the bottom right corner, which is pretty cool. Also, this was a base output, and these are the outputs with the detailer on. So same prompt, same image input, but using the Lora versus without the Lora. And that's with a lower denoise. So this would be denoise 0.6, and then this would be denoise 0.9. I mean, 0.4. Shift 1.5 on the flux boost. And then we decided to have a little bit of fun. Someone was doing really cool in paints. All right. So I took his prompt, and this, I think, is the prompt that you would have got. Yeah, here we go. So we got the right. So there we go. That's what I'm looking for. So that's the result of the prompt out of Flux with the Lora off. And this is the result with the Lora on. And because it's an architectural detailer, look at it. It's tried to turn it into a perfect temple, you know? Now, you might not be looking for that kind of thing, but it's an interesting emergent effect of what these Loras can do when they're trained in a specific way. Mine was trained on architecture and lots of detailed edges and grids. And so as a result, that kind of converts and it ends up giving you a nice detailer. Again, this is the same prompt and seed with and without the Lora loaded. So I haven't used any triggers for Not the True World. That was the whole point of Not the True World, really, was trying to sneak a detailer into an abstract Lora train. And it worked with SDXL and it works with Flux. So I think it's because they're both unit based, but who knows? So there it is again. If anything, it made it a bit more animated in this case, but it depends what it wants to do, I guess. And this is a different one. So that's spoilers now, and that was Epoch 1, so we can ignore that. So let's take a look at the first workflow. Oh, that was a lot of stuff to get through, but I'm sure you guys are using the checkpoint bookmark things by now, timestamps. Anyway, so this is Flux Lora Tester, part 1 of 2 new workflows put in specially for us trainers. This one's very simple, but it explains how the other one's going to work. So we'll walk through it real quick. Quite simply, it's going to do 2 runs, one with and one without. So what we've got is we've got our Lora here. It's going to be sending a name to the file system. That's why we're using this particular Lora loader. So as you can see, we've got a text concatenate with a mode subdirectory. It's going to be printing the name of the Lora and the path to your save. So if you're looking for the pictures, they're saved by Lora name, and you'll figure out why in just a second. So first thing we're going to do is not move everything. First thing we're going to do is obviously make our Lora. So we've got one output here, which is with the Lora on, and we've got one output here, which is with the Lora off. Okay, so we pick our Lora, we run our prompt. We've got the shift boost here. New feature is the Aura Flow switch. You can put it on Aura Flow if you want. I like boost, but some people like Aura Flow. So there it is. It's a model switch, very simple. Just pick the one you want. We've got EULA, 30 steps right now, probably because it's on Epoch 1 and I'm boosting it. We've got denoise and image denoise as usual. We've got the Lora strength here, and obviously you've got your text to image to image switch like we're used to. The resize and load and resize image is 1 node now, so saved a little bit of space. I'm not going to be using any prompt styling, but it is all hooked in there. I've removed the Lora stack because I'll show you in a sec. And I've also removed the control net because we're just testing Lora here. Now, what's nice about this is at the very end, what you can do, I've already named it on, off, and pre-hooked it up for you. But it's going to give you a nice image that you can share, proving that your Lora actually works. Okay, this is more meant for the end. So once you've found your winning candidate, then you can do your on-off comparisons with all of your prompts. All right. So there's no real need for me to show you this. It's pretty straightforward. It is literally the same thing down here without the Lora loader. All right. It's got to be the same. Otherwise, it's not a fair comparison, right? So that's pretty much what's going on here. I would suggest putting the captions, the keywords in here. Like I've chucked a few in for the ones I was working on. But that's pretty much all you got to do. It's on random seed by default. Do remember to change the project name, because obviously that's where your images are going to go. They're all going to go into subfolders. And that's just about it. So Flux Lora tester, guys, makes you a nice little output. And with that out of the way, we can get into the meat and bones of the video. Here it is, Flux Lora compare. So over on the right hand side, we've got all of our compares. So each epoch is going to come in. It's going to be assembled and you're going to put the numbers in. So I start at 6 for this particular run. So I've got 8 slots. There's 8 Lora slots. So that means you're going to put your final epoch here and then put them in order backwards for as many as you have. I'll show you how you can extend it if you've got more, but 8 is a pretty easy to manage number. It is going to take a long time because it is going to have to like purge and reload the model every time. That's just how it works. So because you've got to load the Lora weights to the model every time you do the same prompt, because it's a different Lora every time. So that you can't really get away from that, I don't think. What I've done to make it easy is it's going to be taking the Lora name and putting it into the folder structure. So that way, when you look for your images, if you go, oh, I like Epoch 8, you can just go straight to the Epoch 8 folder. Okay, pick those images and throw them into your upscaler, your favorite boosted Flux upscaler, which is in the pack. So let's get back. So the basic concept is exactly the same as the last one. So if you have a look at that one first, you'll understand where all the controls are. This is identical as the last one. It's just bigger. So we've got our Flux and Aura switch. We've got our text and image to image switch. We've got our sampler and our Lora strength and our denoising settings. So everything's there. Let's put that on image, in text to image real quick. We've got our prompt in the green. We don't really need a negative prompt, but we can use it to inject some freestyling tokens there. Okay, up top, we've got obviously the aspect ratio, very important. Everything is going to be, all dimensions are controlled by this. We've also got our thing. We're going to chuck that on fixed. Why not? And let's just put this one on here. I'm going to call this one demo. Yeah, that went well, didn't it? Let's try that again. Let's call it demo. Okay, compare. Demo, right. Essentially, all of the Foda pack is going to put them into /Foda in your output, and then it's going to like combine. So this will be compare demo and then a bunch of subfolders. So if your Loras are just in the root, it'll just be in the root with the name of the folder which matches the Lora. But obviously, if you have like subfolders like I do, it's going to be Flux, Civet, and then a folder called this, and then images. All right. But trust me, it sounds like loads of subfolders, but when you're like struggling to remember which Lora you loaded for that image and you're comparing like all of them, it gets very disgusting when you've got them all coming into one folder. So this is a good solution. One more thing I would note is if you're not using the Schnell, you would just load a different model and you're going to have to hook up. You're going to have to hook it up basically. On this one, I've got a little reroute there. And that's, I think you just need, in fact, you know what? I think you just need to plug it in here. And the system should take care of it from there. If you have a different clip or VAE, plug it into the first reroute that you see here. Obviously, this one is being fed by the switch, so you don't need to change that. Change the one ahead of it. All right. Okay. I hope I've covered all the basics. Do you know what? I think I'm just going to start it running while we're talking. So what we've got then, the switch. So if you only want to test the last 4, then just disable, everything but the 4, right? And then put your last one there and the last 3. But I think it's really important when we don't really know what the best settings are to be looking at them all. So you've probably got 10 or 5. You've probably got 5. The default training config is 5. I think it's best to do 10 epochs, but we do it with Prodigy and we use cosine. We also use 20 repeats. So it's a little bit of a different config, but we've gone over that and we've shown comparisons. So there's pros and cons to either approach. So what's going on here? We are loading each intermediate. I hope you've got the gist of this. So each intermediate is going to get loaded with the exact same prompt and seed, with the exact same Lora. In fact, you know, I'm not even using a trigger right now. I should be using a trigger for the model that we're testing. Okay, so I want to tell you how to do this properly. So we're using NTTW Flux Kappa. It'll be a good example, actually, of the detailer, though. So I'm going to let it run. But if I take, for example, let's take this one, because it usually will have a cool airship or something like that in the sky there. So we'll take that one. And let's just chuck that in there for now. All right, so let's take a look at some of these images that have actually already been done. So we've got ourselves a bit of a temple with a sphinx head. And like I said, these are pretty good quality. Certainly once we hit them with the upscaler, they're going to get even nicer. Okay. And so this isn't training a sphinx. This is just a prompt for the sphinx. In fact, at the very top, there's going to be a no Lora. Okay, so we can see what the model would have made without any outside influence from our Lora being loaded. Okay, so right now we've got the E6, E7, and if you notice here, there's big changes. So there was a cave, it's gone. It had legs, they're gone. There, you know, I would say those are big changes, right? We go to E8 and E9, and again, big changes. You know, the cave's back. There's now a wall here. There's bits of rock in the thing. I know this sounds obvious, but it you know, that's the whole thing. The distance and the lighting on the rock, that looks much further away and larger than this. This looks closer and smaller. Also, the architecture, look, it ends on this cliff as a cliff, but this has been carved out like walls. And there's like a castle here now. Okay. So you can see it's like it's still learning. It's still learning. And when I say that, I mean it's learning in my, because these are all epochs of my Lora, which I trained. Now, I'm giving you a bit of example of how the detailer is working right now, because I'm using the prompt for the Sphinx right now. Okay. In fact, is it still written here? Yeah. Serene coastal landscape where towering cliffs have been intricately carved into the shape of an ancient sphinx, reminiscent of Egyptian architecture. The sphinx faces the ocean, its massive form casting a shadow on the calm, reflective waters below. The sky is clear and bright blue, adding to the surreal beauty of the scene with the contrast between the warm tones of the carved stone and the cool, tranquil sea. So that's what we got. That was submitted by somebody in the Discord. Thank you very much. It's a really cool prompt. Like I said, it actually just works great, even with or without Loras. But it's also great for showing the influence of the Lora as it's been trained. Okay, so this would be the output that you would get from the base on this particular seed with this particular prompt. So we've got the cave, we've got some really good paws, the whole thing's carved. You can almost see Egyptian stuff on the ribs. And again, it looks a bit like a sort of photograph. Now, so if we then take it from here and scroll down, whoop. Okay, we've already looked at a lot of these. Yeah, we've looked at these. Yeah. Okay, so now we see how it's getting more detailed now. We're getting more structures, because remember, it was trained on buildings. So my Lora really wants to make buildings, and it wants walls. It wants to make sharp edges and corners. Okay. Sometimes that will even manifest as hieroglyphics if we're lucky. Okay, so it's starting to put some texture in. Got the cave back. Okay, it's definitely a bit sharper. But if anything, it makes it look new. You know, it looks like a newly carved sphinx, not an ancient one. And also, sometimes the scale is insane. Look how big this is. Is that a door down there? This thing's massive. I think this is the last one. Is this the last one? Yeah, this is the last one. Now you get to a point where you're just overtraining, and we've talked about that. So if we take a look at the grid together, it's more apparent. So if you remember in the first grid, we're getting different images every time. It's evolving into something new, probably a castle. But as we go through, look, eventually that variation is sort of running out. So like I said, overall, I decided to pick Epoch 11 for my particular sort of best, because I found that when I was running lots of different prompts, in fact, let's run another one while we're talking here. You have to kind of call it generally. We've already been through it in this video, so I'm not going to go through it all again. But essentially, I'll give you one more tip as well. So this is your reward for watching all the way to the end. So you might wonder how sometimes we can build these workflows so big and it doesn't actually take as long as you might think. So there's a simple trick which anyone can do, and I'm going to do it up here because it's nice and easy to demonstrate. You probably know this, and I'm sorry for hyping it up if you already knew this. But if you don't know this, you probably are in reconnection hell every time I put a workflow out. So here it is. Right. So we take our code, right? It's all hooked up nice. We control, click, and drag. And I know you already know this. Control Z. And you know about Control V. But this is no good. That's far too much effort. But if you hold Control Shift V, you get all the wires. And so then if you want to do 18 bajillion different versions of where you only change one thing, which is how I built this, because this is obviously just Lora CNET, Lora CNET with CNET and the Lora stack ripped out, moved a few things. I say just because it took a while to build, but Control Shift V, guys. Control Shift V. All right. A lot of people don't know how to do it. And I know it's going to be a big deal for people because obviously if you've got, if you just need to duplicate like, oh, that was nice. I wonder what it would be like at 3.7, but you don't really want to change it. Well, obviously you can Control C, move over to a nice space, Control V, and then we can put this one to 3.7. And then on the next run, we're going to get another image. And then if that was a complete waste of time. Whatever possessed me to do that? So then you can delete it. All right. So that was my top tip. That was my top tip of the day. Maybe we'll come up with some more of those. But I hope you can see how this tool essentially enables you to very quickly see what's being learned, whether it's even learning. Okay, because obviously you've got that baseline comparison with the Lora being turned off. And obviously, if you get one of these, I just go through all the major prompts in my data set. And at the end of it, I look at all these images and I go, do you know what? Didn't really learn anything after Epoch 11 on this one. And it does move. Okay, so for example, on my 10 Epoch model, it actually converged at Epoch 8. With another one, it actually converged at... Anyway, I'm just trying to say, you got to do your due diligence. You got to test all your intermediates, or at least the last 8, I would recommend, because you might be surprised sometimes. In fact, this is something that I kind of did a bit of a spoiler about earlier. Basically, I've been doing some style training. So if I go back here, and I'll show you what's coming up. So we've got Thora locations, which will go with the Thora anime model. So this is going to be all backgrounds, interiors, sci-fi, anime, background interiors. Okay. So corridors, airlocks, that kind of thing. And then the, scene. I'm talking about scene. That's scene. Locations is actually actions. For some reason, I typed the wrong thing in and couldn't change it. So whatever. It hasn't even started training yet. But what I really wanted to talk about was Thoracine Lite V2. Because what I've actually done with V1 is train it at the usual 216 rank on Civet. I decided to do this one at 416, and it started training first just because of the luck of the queue. And as you can see, at Epoch 1, it's already on par with the kind of images that it should be creating. And it really pulls into question certain types of images, because there's no person in this. It's just a room, an interior. Certain types of images don't need anywhere near as much training as we think. And we're still trying to work it out, and we'll obviously provide you with the best. I like to try and get you the best information because I don't like wasting time overtraining and undertraining, and we want to get the best results. Now, this is undertrained, but I just had to remark on how crazy it actually learned from just one epoch. Obviously, it's still got a couple. I'm going to let it go all the way, and I'll compare them properly. I'm not going to cut any corners, But it's just remarkable that Flux can train so well with one epoch, with the method that we're using. All right, that is everything. So, thank you very much for watching. Make sure to come and check out all the models that came out. Stop by the Discord and let us know. And I'll see you next time. So, memberships are here. I've added donator and member. The donator membership is just you want to support the channel, help us grow. Member, you're going to get some exclusive video access. And check out the join now button for more information.